Welcome to the introduction to Excel. This very short, rapid learning video will show you a quick overview of the screen that you see when you first open up Excel. Opening up Excel will show you a new workbook. Now, a workbook is the whole thing. Inside that workbook are what we call worksheets. You can see that on this particular workbook I have one sheet given to me as indicated by the small tab at the bottom of the screen. On versions 2013 and above, you'll be given one new sheet every time you create a new book. In previous versions it will give you by default 3 worksheets. You can add sheets, delete them and move them once you've created them. That will be shown in another video on this channel. For now, we're going to have a quick brief overview of the screen itself. As well as the workbook, the worksheet you're given has what we call cells. That's these little rectangular boxes that you can click on to select. Each of these cells has a cell reference, and you can tell from looking at the top of the sheet there are column letters A, B, C, D and so on. Down the side of the sheet you have row numbers 1, 2, 3, 4 and it continues. Every cell that you click on will have a cell reference and you recite the column then row number. So in this case I'm in C5. If I click here I'm in B2 and this one E3. It's also possible to zoom into a sheet by using the zoom slider bar, which is placed down here in the bottom right corner. Now you'll notice that there's a plus and a minus either side of this zoom bar. You can either click on the plus and this will increase the size of the sheet to make it easier for you to see. You'll notice the percentage increases here. If I click on the minus, I can zoom out so I can see more of the sheet on my screen. You may also use the little slider which is on this zoom bar. If I grab hold of the little handle and slide it left or right, it will zoom out or zoom in. Along the top of the screen you'll see what Microsoft call ribbon bars. These are ribbons that contain all of the buttons that you'll use in Excel. You'll notice that there's more than one ribbon. They've all been given their own individual names. You can see at the moment we're on what's called the home ribbon. This is the one that you'll spend most of your time in. You also have other ribbons such as insert, and when you click on one of these it will bring the ribbon to the front. Page layout, you have formulas, data, review and view. You may also have some other ribbon bars which you can add at a later date. We'll go back to the home as that's the one that you will spend most of your time on. Now each ribbon is divided into sections. You'll notice that on the home ribbon, along the bottom edge of the ribbon there's section names such as clipboard, font, alignment, number, styles and so on. The buttons in each section, you can normally tell what they do just by looking at the picture on the button. If you're not sure, then you can move your mouse over a button and keep it there for a few seconds and what will happen is that you will get what we call some bubble help. This will pop up a little box that tells you two things. It tells you the name of the button, but it also gives you a short description as to what that button does. After a while you'll get used to what these buttons do, so you won't have to hover over any of the buttons for a few seconds. Now if you look closely on some of the buttons, they will have what we call a drop down triangle beside it. If you look, for example, on this button here called Merge and Center, as well as being able to click on the button, there's also a little drop down arrow beside it just to the right, and when you click on that it will pop down other choices. Not all the buttons have this. If I click again on that arrow, it collapses the menu up. If we look at a popular one over here, for example, this button here will change the colour of the font, the text. At the moment it's showing red on the button. That will mean that if I click on the button directly, it will change the colour of my text that I've written into red. If I don't want red, then I can click on the little drop down arrow beside that button and it pops down a little palette where I can choose the colour that I want the text to be. One thing to remember about ribbons is that you only do a single click on the tab of the ribbon to bring it to the front. If ever you find that your ribbons disappear, that's probably because you've accidentally double clicked your left mouse button on a tab. If I demonstrate double clicking, you'll notice that the ribbon collapses. It doesn't get removed, it just collapses it out of the way. It will only reappear temporarily when you click on a ribbon, and then when you click away it disappears again. Now if you quite like that, then leave it set to that. If you don't, then you need to double click on one of the ribbon tabs, and that will keep the ribbons permanently open. Most people find this the preferred way of working. If we take a look at the top left corner of your Excel window, you'll see there should be 3 buttons. Now if you're using Excel that's not new, in other words other colleagues or people have used it before you, you may have more than 3 buttons at the top here. This is known as the Quick Access toolbar. It's called that because it's always in view, so buttons on there are very quick to access. The 3 buttons by default are the Save button, that's the one with a picture of a floppy disk icon. Then you have 2 buttons showing arrows pointing left and right. The first one pointing to the left is called Undo. This is when you make a mistake in Excel. You can click on this button multiple times and it will take you back in time. It will undo the last tasks you've just done. If you go back too far, you can click on the Redo button, which is the arrow pointing to the right, and that will bring back what you've undone. We will look at this more in depth through later courses. To use the worksheet and the workbook, you click where you want to type. So in this case I've clicked once onto A1, that's the cell reference where I want to type, and I can type something in here, for example tables, and I then press enter on my keyboard to move away from that. Make sure that when you're typing into Excel you always press the enter key when you've finished, just out of habit. That ensures that Excel knows it's been entered. Try and avoid clicking your mouse away. A lot of people do this, but it does have a knock-on effect later on when you're writing formulas and calculations. So it's better to get into the habit of pressing the enter key every time you've finished writing something into a cell. I could then type something else in the cell below in A2, such as chairs. Now I then want to put some numbers in, and I can put those in the next column. So I can either use my mouse to click in B1, or I could use the arrow keys on my keyboard, often called the cursor keys. You will find these keys on your keyboard in a little cluster pointing left, right, up and down. I can move my selected cell up and down, left and right. So I can move to cell B1 where I want to type a number. I can then type a number in there and press the enter key again. I can enter another number and press enter. When you type into a cell, it goes into that cell. Now remember that when you come to type something that doesn't fit into a cell. For example, sales for this year. Now you'll notice it bleeds over into the next cell. If I press enter, although it looks as though that piece of text takes up 2 cells, it is actually originating from B4. If I click on cell B4, if I look just above the sheet and below the ribbon, that's this little bar here, this is known as the formula bar. It shows you the content of whichever cell you click. It will display the entire content. So when I click on B4, you can see that it has just what I've typed. If I click in the cell next to it that appears to have some text in, you'll notice there's absolutely nothing in here. Remember that for future reference. When you type into a cell, even though it may bleed over other cells, it actually lives in the cell that it originated from. Once you've typed information into your workbook, we then need to save the book. Now, one thing to bear in mind about saving is that you save the entire book. You do not save individual sheets. So although I've only got one worksheet in this book, if I've got several, I don't have to go onto each sheet in turn and save it. You save the entire book that contains those sheets. Now to save, you go up to the save button, which is up in the top left corner. Click on that once. When you do that, you'll come into either this view, or if you're on an earlier version, it will bring up a small box. This is where you tell it where you want to save the file first of all. Now, because I want to choose somewhere, I'm going to click on this browse. That will then allow me to browse my computer. Now, this is the box you will see immediately if you were on an earlier version than 2013 of Excel. There is a separate course we do on file management, and there'll be a link above this right now. You first of all want to locate where you would like to save the file. Always look at the top. This tells you where it's going to put it. I don't want to put it in my documents. I actually want to put it onto my desktop. I click on desktop down here, which then puts it up there. I then click where it's got file name, and it will highlight what's in there at the moment in blue. I can now overtype this. You don't need to delete it, you just overtype it. So I just give my book a name. So I might type in first ever workbook. Give it a more meaningful name and then click on the Save button here. You've now saved your workbook. You always know when you've got a book saved, and also you can see the name of it right at the very top of the screen in what we call the title bar.